Hi Sloths, and welcome back to Unpopular Opinions, the show where I try to piss off the internet. Today we're covering one of the gaming industry's most notorious entities, DLC. Downloadable content is a complete and utter mess these days. Starting as expansion packs in the 80s, DLC has kinda grown a lot. But it's grown out of control, and, in my opinion, has become a bit of a glorified scam in most cases. I really don't like DLC, and will only buy it if it adds extra story content to the game. Cosmetics and new weapons shouldn't cost 20 plus quid, and you certainly shouldn't have to pay over 100 quid to obtain every cosmetic pack in things like Little Big Planet 3 or The Sims 4. It's ludicrous how much you have to spend to play a game with every single extra bit of content. The game industry loves DLC, and ever since the rise of the internet and downloadable updates, DLC has become so common that even Pokemon has massively overpriced DLC. Let's look into the reasons why I and many others are fed up with DLC. Then we'll take a look at the so-called good side of DLC. But first, I'd like to share with you what my friend Infernal Harmony had to say. He says, "I don't always agree with DLC. Sometimes I can agree with it, sometimes I can't justify it. I think a lot of DLCs are really lacking these days. There's usually not enough quality or justifiable content to warrant the prices. For example, if a DLC has only around 10% of the quality or content as the base game, it shouldn't be as expensive or nearly as expensive as the base game itself." When a game releases, one of the first thoughts on customers' minds is, will it have DLC? This question has become a new norm, to the point where many gamers worry that when a new game releases, it's going to be somewhat incomplete due to several hours of story-driven content being locked behind paid DLC. Some of the prime examples of this would be games such as Fire Emblem Fates, Mass Effect 3, Dying Light, and even a game I love, Doom Eternal. All games that lock their endings behind paid DLC. Often when games have this incompleteness to it, it not only lacks endings or several hours of side content or even a new campaign, but it also severely lacks in quality and polish. Just look at the latest Pokemon games. Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, all 4 games are around £60, with DLC half the price of the base game. And we all know they lack quality. It doesn't help that the base games are short and easy unless you plan on 100%ing the Pokédex, of course, and exploring every possible aspect of the game. People like to use the analogy of the developers holding content hostage, and the additional paywall for a DLC is the ransom. When discussing DLC, a certain aspect of mobile gaming comes to mind: microtransactions. Many people often liken microtransactions to the free-to-play games you mostly see on mobile app stores. It's as if paid games now have microtransactions. This type of DLC is often purely cosmetic or adds a new weapon or upgraded feature into the game, such as 2013's Tomb Raider, Borderlands 2, and even Train Simulator has a lot of DLC, ranging from very cheap cosmetics to moderately priced expansion packs to the outrageous £30 add-ons. Many games can have mixed bags of DLC quality and prices. Money. Money, money, money. Game developers love the crisp, fresh plastic banknotes of the modern United Kingdom, almost as much as they like the flappy green paper notes of America. No country is safe from DLC, and many developers will go out of their way to give anyone a reason to pay more for the content they create, whether they're being greedy on purpose, or if the game is just being forced in that direction by companies higher ups. It's not just AAA gamers that have to deal with this, but casual mobile gamers and lovers of indie franchises also have to deal with things like microtransactions and overpriced DLC. If you don't believe me, just look at indie games like Skullgirls, Euro Truck Simulator, and even Dredge. This is an argument that stems from quality assurance, or lack thereof, in modern AAA game development companies. In recent years, we've seen the glitches and poor graphical and mechanical quality of the Pokemon games and its DLCs, as well as the mess that was Cyberpunk 2077, and many other games that completely fell face first into a volcano in terms of fan enjoyment. But that's not really the excuse when it comes to the laziness of having DLC. Many development teams are pressured by time constraints, either ones put on by themselves or by the higher ups in the company. Sometimes games become so big they can't possibly release it on time. In the past, games would take 3 to 5 years to develop, and now some companies are churning out games within 1 to 2 years and then releasing DLC within a few months after release. And the quality of these kinds of games and their DLC seems like the developers have been sitting on their asses watching TikTok or Family Guy for a week straight instead of getting some actual work done. When thinking about lazy DLC content, many take the time to point out games like The Sims 4, the Batman Arkham Trilogy, and even Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Some other arguments I've been seeing for disliking DLC are things like it being pay to win, where some DLC gives you stronger weapons, skills and abilities. Then there's the debate on game passes that limit how long you can have certain characters, items, abilities, weapons, skills, cosmetics, or even game modes. Some people talk about how, although DLC appears to be optional, completionists and people who want to play the full game with its content are being forced to pay a lot of extra money to play a shorter experience than what they believe to be adequate for the price. Some people just see it as a gross and scummy business practice, and others believe it to be the fault of the consumers who still buy DLC regardless of their stance on DLC and similar practices such as microtransactions and loot boxes. Even people who boycott DLC might eventually buy 1 or 2 DLC packs for a game they really like. For me, that was Doom Eternal, The Ancient Gods Part 1 and Part 2. I'll admit, there's plenty of games out there with DLC where I can agree with the amount of content. Maybe not the price tag, but if a game is getting hours of new content, that's good, right? Although many games lock endings behind paid DLC, many games often hold an entire after-story campaign or even new quests and storylines that can be played during the base game. Fighting games such as Mortal Kombat and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate added new playable characters. It didn't help or hinder the player, but offered more content and a wider variety of playable characters. It also shows that developers are listening to their fans and adding in content that the fans are asking for. Think about the roars of excitement when Banjo and Kazooie was announced for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, or the DC fans' excitement when the Joker was available in Mortal Kombat 11. Adding new content can also come with new story developments, offering a true ending of sorts, or even showing the story being told from a different perspective, which is really cool. Games such as Resident Evil 4, Dishonored, and Outlast took this concept and ran with it really well. A controversial take on DLC these days is that some of it can actually be good. There are plenty of games out there that fans swear are better because of the DLC. More content means more fun to be had, right? Some developers actually listen to their fans, and they set reasonable prices for the amount of content they're getting with the DLC. Where some may find laziness in DLC, many fans believe games that lack DLC are the lazy ones. When it comes to indie games or smaller studios within larger companies, DLC can be seen as their lifeline. If a game isn't very large or doesn't sell well, having DLC can help those developers to break even if enough people are interested. Instead of adding extra content to the games, some developers will use DLC as an opportunity to further support the talents who worked on the games by having DLC that includes things like new rendered artwork, concept art from development, or even the official soundtrack for that game. People clearly want DLC, and developers also want to work on DLC. Not all developers are greedy, and not all fans are compulsive completionists. Some developers may never get the chance to expand on some of the stories they've created, so they might take the time to try and justify to their higher-ups the importance of DLC, so they can finish their stories or just expand upon what they've already created. When a game becomes someone's favourite, they will want to play it more. If a game's not that replayable, DLC may be the best choice for them. There is an obvious demand for DLC. I can't possibly deny that. Despite previous boycotts and disgust at some of the more scummy practices of modern DLC, even I can't escape the need for new content in games I enjoy. My overall opinion is that I really don't like the way modern DLC has been going over the past few years. But if this is the new normal for the games industry, is it worth complaining about? It's not going to change anytime soon, and if there is demand, there will always be a supply of some sort of DLC in many games. My hope is that developers or companies take a step back and assess their prices before releasing both games and any DLC they produce for those games. Not everyone can afford 70 quid with 30 plus quid DLC, and with those sorts of prices becoming more common, the game development industry may very well begin to collapse. But of course, that is going to do it for this episode. Please like and subscribe, it's always free, and I'll see you later.